This program is made possible by the support of Delta Dental, Quick Trip, Marshfield Clinic Health System, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Hospital Association. Watch Wisconsin Eye on Spectrum Channels 995 and 363 and at wisi.org.
By 8 o'clock, just make sure that you're using the right option for that return to make sure it gets to the place where it needs to be counted by 8 o'clock. And there's still time to vote in person as well. You just need to be in line by 8 o'clock. So it continues to be a smooth day across Wisconsin. There's no widespread issues being reported to the Wisconsin Elections Commission. We continue to maintain a reserve pool of National Guard members to serve as poll workers in the event that there is a poll worker shortage. We actually even sent out a follow-up alert to our counties, just reminding them that there was this reserve still available and that if they had jurisdictions with shortages or people maybe that didn't show up for the second shift of the day, that there continues to be that reserve. But we're still hearing from around the state in response to those prompts that there are no real issues being reported around the state and that there are no poll worker shortages being reported around the state either. So that's great news. There's also been some questions this afternoon, so we kind of try to keep you in the loop on any questions that we're receiving to answer them consistently. And one of those questions has been about a recent USPS court ruling and the extraordinary efforts being made to make sure ballots get to the polling place. Just, to sort of set the stage for those questions, the Wisconsin Elections Commission was not a party to those suits. It sounds like some between the Inspector General's office and some of the attorney generals of various states. But what I do know is that in meeting with our regional and our local USPS representatives, who we've really formed a wonderful relationship with over this year, that they've described all of the efforts that they're making at the local level. And we've even invited them on a lot of our calls with our local election officials over the last few weeks to make sure that our local clerks are talking with the local postmasters to make sure that they're getting ballots to the polls to be counted by 8 o'clock tonight. So we've helped to coordinate those calls and those relationships between those local election officials, between the postmasters, and we know that they're all working together to arrange getting ballots to clerks by 8 p.m. today so that the ballots can be counted. But beyond that, you would have to ask any specific questions about that ruling to the USPS or to any of the parties specifically as part of that ruling. And then one reminder that is sort of new today in terms of reminders, and that is as we get closer to the end of election night, closer to polls closing and the tallying being the main show, is that just a reminder that if unofficial results aren't available until morning, it does not mean that something went wrong. It simply means that election officials are doing their jobs. And our jobs as election officials is to make sure that we get it right, to make sure that every ballot gets counted. And so just, I think, a very important reminder as we head into tonight that our election inspectors, they're going to continue to value accuracy over speed. And so tonight, as we get into those unofficial totals, please just do what you can to responsibly talk about, predictions and whatnot to voters, because election night results are always unofficial. And there's actually 3 levels of certification, and we can talk about that tonight at 9. There's 3 levels of certification before results are ever official. And in Wisconsin, our statutory deadline to certify the contest is December 1st. And prior to that, the municipalities have to conduct their canvass and certify results. Then the counties conduct their canvass and certify results. And only after all 3 levels have certified the results do we have official results or official winners. And so anything that's reported tonight, any declarations that are made tonight, those are based on unofficial, incomplete results. Because we also have things like provisional ballots. those aren't, counted until Friday. The voters have till Friday to bring in their photo ID to have those ballots counted. And so any predictions that are made tonight are based on unofficial results and incomplete results, and they're just that, predictions. So please, whatever you can do to make sure that we're spreading that message to voters, because there's so many great things that happen between election night and the unofficial tally and posting those unofficial results to certifying results to make sure that we got it right. And I think once voters know about that and they know the difference between unofficial and certified results, it's a really meaningful distinction that I think helps to instill confidence in the process. So some important reminders as we head into election night, that at no point will election officials sacrifice accuracy for speed, and that they have added resources like poll workers and equipment that helps them create efficiencies, but they will continue to tally until each ballot is counted, and they're going to give each ballot the same care, security, despite the larger volume of absentees that is at the polls and at central count. So that's really all I have in terms of updates, but I'd be glad to answer any questions that you all might have.
Sorry, first up is Scott Bauer.
Oh, hey, Megan. I just want to clarify, because I wasn't on any of these earlier today. Have there been any National Guard troops who were used today in any capacity? And if so, how many? And yeah, I think that's it. I just want to clarify.
Yeah, thank you for that question.
There's 200 or so in reserve. Does that mean 200 were used to fill gaps?
That's right. So there were around 220 that were used in various jurisdictions around the states as they had outages, or, in some communities as they just could use an extra set of hands to help them with things like, again, cleaning surfaces or helping with counting absentees or processing absentees. And so there's about 220 that have been sent to municipalities to assist today, but we maintain a reserve pool of around 200 as well. And so we put out a second call to jurisdictions and just said, hey, we still have these folks in reserve if you need an extra hand as you're processing absentees. So we still have that reserve pool. Some of them may be deployed tonight for the second shift as we near in towards the evening.
Great, thank you.
I will say, too, a lot of our jurisdictions did a phenomenal job of recruiting a backup pool of poll workers. So a lot of our counties and our municipal governments, they trained county and municipal employees in the event that there was a shortage to be able to step in and help out. And so in a lot of our communities, they had already created that pool of backup workers and haven't needed to ask for additional help.
Next is Adam Brewster.
Hey, Megan, thanks again for doing this. Just to clarify on the USPS issue, so that order to sweep for ballots, that didn't apply to anywhere in Wisconsin, is what you were saying, or did I misunderstand that?
We're not a party to that suit, so I can't speak to it. It was not something that involved the Wisconsin Elections Commission. I know probably as much as you do about it, and it sounds like it was an order to the Inspector General's office, which is a distinct office from USPS, to do sweeps prior to the end of election night. But we've talked to our local and regional folks, the actual, USPS employees, and they had already planned to do those sorts of things regionally for Wisconsin voters. So, regardless of whatever a court order might have said, they were already planning to make all efforts to get ballots to where they need to go by 8 p.m. tonight.
Got it. And so just a quick follow, if any ballots, the Postal Service does a sweep and finds, however many ballots, and they get to the polling site or central count at 8:01 or shortly after, are you going to advise clerks just keep those separate in case they become part of a legal challenge? Not count them or anything, but just have them set aside in case it becomes a question that the courts have to weigh in on?
That's always the process. So, they always have to maintain balloting materials for the statutory records retention period, which is 22 months for most things. And so if there are ballots that are returned to be rejected because they have some other deficiency, because the voter is no longer eligible, or if they're returned after the deadline, those are materials that the clerks always maintain.
And if I could just jump in, I think the order applied to the Lakeland district of USPS, which covers about 2/3 of the eastern part of Wisconsin. So I think it does apply to parts of Wisconsin, but the USPS in Wisconsin. So next is Connor Ferguson from MDC.
Hi, Meagan. Thanks so much for doing this. Just a few questions for you, all about absentee ballots. Are you able to tell us how many have been returned to county boards of elections, and if you have a party breakdown for them? And then just 2 follow-ups to that.
Sure. So we do. We've been posting every morning on elections.wi.gov at 7:30. We post the number of absentees that have been requested, have been returned on the website. And so maybe Reed, while we're talking, can look that exact number up. I don't have it in front of me. In terms of party affiliation, we do not track party affiliation in Wisconsin. So every state is different. In Wisconsin, you don't register as a party. So we have no idea what any voter's affiliation is as part of the record.
Okay. How about, a rejection rate for these absentee ballots? Is that also included? Yeah. Forgive me.
No, that's okay. So we do have that information publicly available, but it's not part of that data set that we post every morning. That said, I do have some information for you just based on a report that we pulled today. And these are all rough numbers, right? Because it's dependent on each jurisdiction entering the data. And so when our clerks are working at the polls or organizing their polling places, they're not doing real-time data entry on some of these things today. So certainly some of these ballots have been cured today, where the voter's been contacted and they've been able to come down and cure their ballots. But as of this afternoon, it looks like there were about 970 ballots that were returned and were marked as having some type of a deficiency. So that's a pretty small percentage out of 2.2 million that were issued.
Got it. Thank you so much.
All right. Next is Steve Hansen from Wisconsin Community.
Thank you for holding this call. Out here in Dunn County, we've had some readers complain about one of the townships having election officials who are not wearing masks. Has that happened in any extent in the state, or are we an oddity here?
Yeah, thanks, Steve, for the question. So I have not heard that being widespread, but there have certainly been a few questions about that today. I could probably count on one hand the questions where, somebody's brought that up at a polling place. So it certainly doesn't seem to be widespread. But the guidance is that, poll workers and observers are required to wear masks. And that their chief inspector, the clerk who trains them and sets the requirements for their interaction with the polls, is the one that's enforcing those rules, and also working with voters or working with poll workers if they were to have some type of a medical exemption. They're the ones that would be working with them is the chief inspector. But all voters are required to wear voters are recommended to wear masks by the commission. But that's the only set of people where we can't ascribe a separate qualification to voting. So it can't be a requirement of voters, but the chief inspector is able to set those requirements for poll workers and observers and to enforce those.
Next is Ellie Kaufman.
Hi, Meagan. Okay, I have a couple questions for you. The first one is, do you guys have any numbers on how many same-day registrations you've had for voters today?
Nope, we won't have that until after today. So okay. Election day registrations happen on paper largely. So we will have that information after participation is recorded. And typically all of that happens, the statutory deadline is 30 days after the election.
Got it. And then in Outagamie County, I know that there's some National Guard members helping copy over ballots that were misprinted. Do those ballots have to be copied over by 8 p.m.? And if they're not finished by 8 p.m., what happens?
Right. No, they don't have to be remade by 8 o'clock. So they're remade as part of the canvass process. So the ballot has been received to be counted by 8 p.m. But as they're going through and processing those ballots, if there are ballots that have to be remade, that's part of the canvass process that can extend until all ballots have been counted.
Okay. So there's no time deadline on them right now.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Next, we've got Patrick Marley.
Hi, thanks, Megan. Well, I wanted to follow up on the question about Outagamie County. Any word about how that's going? They had a lot of ballots they had to remake. Have you gotten a report on how it's going?
I've checked in with them multiple times myself, as has our staff, and all signs are pointing to that they're doing well, that they're on track as anticipated. We've, I believe, worked with the National Guard to send them some additional assistance just to make sure they have some more sets of helping hands. But no, they haven't reported to us any issues or concerns in terms of being able to handle the volume. So, and they're still assessing as they process absentees, how many have to be remade. So as they've said, it could be as few as 3,000 ballots or as many as 9,000. It just depends what ballots are impacted by that scratch on the timing mark.
Okay, and earlier I had heard 13,500. They've dropped the top number down to 9,000. Is that the latest you have?
That's the latest I have, yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about is related to Dropboxes. I know different communities are shutting off access to their Dropbox at different times so that they can make sure the ballots get to the proper place before the polls close at 8. If someone's Dropbox is closed, is it the case that in all central count communities, they have to go to the central count facility, and in all non-central count, they have to go to their usual polling place? Or is it entirely dependent on what the local clerks want for where they should go?
Right. So it is dependent on the local jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions don't even have their Dropboxes open today. And we've encouraged them to all post on the Dropboxes what the requirements are for that jurisdiction. But like you said, the ballots have to get to the place where they're going to be counted by 8 o'clock. And so for some communities, that's going to mean if it's 7:30 or 7:45, it has to go right to the polling place or right to central count, because there wouldn't be time to make that transfer between any alternate locations. So each community should be keeping their voters informed about those opportunities. Again, we've encouraged them all to post signs on their Dropboxes or on their other return locations, letting voters know at the end of the night where they need to go to drop that ballot off, especially in that last half hour, to ensure that it's at the place where it's going to be counted by 8 o'clock. So there's not really a blanket rule for central count versus polling place locations. It really does depend on the community.
So if you're a central count community, even then some may decide to have you send it to your local polling place instead of the central count? Or are all 39 central counts ones where you have to go to the central count location?
Right. There are, from what I understand, there are some communities that allow voters to drop ballots off at the polling place and then they'll route them down to central count.
Okay.
But, if it's 7:45 and a voter comes and wants to drop off their ballot at a polling place, they might say, we're not going to have time to get that to central count by 8 o'clock. So if you want to return your ballot, after 7:30, after 7:45, you need to go down to central count. Here's where you go. And those central count facilities, most of them, the ones that I've talked to, have people at the door of central count to be able to receive ballots up until 8.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. And we've been telling people consistently, follow the instructions that come with your ballot for where you return it, because trying to communicate all the different rules to people across the state is just very complicated. So next up is Chris Hubbuck. Got to unmute yourself, Chris.
Yep. Hi. Thanks. I'm wondering if you have any data on the number of poll workers and what percentage of them are new or for this election or this year.
That is a great question, but it's not one that we would have an answer to. So each of the 1,850 municipalities is responsible for recruiting and training poll workers. It's not something that's tracked as part of the state system. After the election, there are some federal reports that our local election officials are asked to submit some of the data about their poll workers, but that wouldn't be available in aggregate until after the election.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Let's see. Next is Riley Vetterkind.
Hi. I'm sorry if this has already been covered, but do you have any update on how many outstanding absentee ballots there are, or are we just going to find out as returns come in tonight? I just want to see if you had any updates on that.
Yeah. So again, that data all hinges on local jurisdictions recording the ballots that have been received in their local communities. And so, Reed, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we would have whatever the most up-to-date data is by tomorrow morning.
Yeah, so so as of 7:30 this morning, there were 141,776 ballots that were sent out that had not been recorded as returned. That said, there are data lags, there are other things. Some of those people may have decided they weren't going to vote by absentee, they were going to go and vote in person instead. We'll get more data in as time goes on. There's probably not been very many clerks who are recording those things in the system. So our numbers tomorrow morning may not be a whole lot different. Maybe they will be, and we'll be surprised. But
they might be because Central Count they have computers there, and as ballots come in, they're actually logging those into WisVote. The thing I'll say though, just building off what Reed said, is what that number won't account for so the unreturned absentees is for merging that with voter participation. So like Reed said, if there are people that chose not to return their absentee and instead go and vote at the polls or even vote during in-person absentee, that number won't be reconciled until after participation is recorded, which is 30 days after the election. So we might have a better idea, but it certainly won't be a perfect number.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is Ben Wells from Marquette.
Hi, Megan. Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to ask, is it a violation of law to deny media completely from a polling building where voting is taking place? And the reason why I ask this is because Marquette said their polling place, the Alumni Memorial Union, is a private building and did not allow media inside today. Are they in the wrong in doing so?
So thanks for the question. I actually fielded this question myself, and I was in contact with Milwaukee. And it's my understanding that that was the posted rule by the university for that building, like you referenced, but that the university did agree to remove that sign after they were asked to. So that sign was removed about media not being allowed. So, it gets tricky when you're using private spaces and navigating the rules that they might have for their spaces. But in that case, they did remove that notice once they were asked to.
Is that a violation of law?
Is it a violation of law?
Is that a violation of law?
I don't know that it's specifically a violation of the law, no, because each polling place is allowed to set, their requirements for how many observers they're able to allow in, if they're able to allow media in without causing a disturbance or without causing the polling place to say be too full for us to accomplish social distancing. And so it's not an explicit violation of the law. And Reed, please chime in if you disagree. But I think it's certainly something that, in the interest of transparency at our polling places is a good idea if they're able to do it without causing a disturbance and without jeopardizing anybody's ability to social distance.
If you're talking about whether it's a violation of the law, that's a good question to ask a lawyer. And neither of us are lawyers.
Understandable. Thank you.
Yeah. Next is Will Keneally. Will, we can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, that's weird. I had a quick question about the post offices. Meagan, you were mentioning earlier that the post offices in the state that you were working with were kind of voluntarily doing this kind of extra sweep. Was that statewide, or was that just in that Lakeland postal district?
Yeah, so, we talked to postal representatives from the, I'm learning a lot about the postal service, but I don't know everything. I haven't been able to find time to become a postal expert too. But the other district that routes through the Minneapolis area, we talked to representatives from both areas on a regular basis. And it was our understanding from conversations we have with them very regularly that they were all, as regions, were adopting that policy to make sure that they were locally holding ballots and to do everything they could to get them to the correct polling place by 8 p.m.
Thanks.
But they would have to speak to their policies. I can't really speak to exactly what their policies are for their employees.
Oh, definitely. Also, I don't know if you might know this too, but do you know how many ballots might be kind of caught in that secondary sweep?
I don't, because it all hinges on if there's voters that returned their ballots in the last few days. So we should, in theory, find out, because when the local election officials receive the ballot, that's part of the data that they enter into the statewide system about when the ballot was received. So we should have that data after Election Day and after reconciliation, but we won't know exactly how many arrived after today. And I don't know that we would ever know exactly how many arrived due to a sweep.
Definitely. Thank you.
And next is Caroline Kenny.
Hi, Meagan. I just have to circle back to the questions about Outagamie County. And I just want to clear something up because we are trying to report some stuff on this right now. Our correspondent just spoke to the clerk since this call began, since 5 o'clock. And she came back to him with the 13,500 number still. So I just want to clarify which number should we be using right here.
I would defer to the clerk by all means. She would have a better idea of exactly what the number was. So that I was just relaying information that I had heard from Outagamie County. So if they're saying that's the number, then I would believe them.
Okay, thanks.
All right, those are all the questions I've got. Anybody else? We're at about half an hour now. Adam Brewster has another question.
Sure.
Just real quick, have you, generally speaking, I've seen the updates from Madison and Milwaukee that they feel their counting is going well. Is there just a general sense you have from clerks about how the absentee counting process is going?
Yeah, generally, what we've been hearing is that it's been going well. In some communities, they've reported that, maybe turnout was pretty steady throughout the day. And so they had to reallocate resources or add additional folks to the process so that they could have poll workers working on absentee and also managing the in-person voting as well. But I have not received any alerts or heard any red flags to lead us to believe that there's any communities that are specifically struggling.
Great. Carolyn, did you have anything else? Your hand was still up, or did I just?
Oh, no, I'm good. Sorry.
Okay. All right. I guess that's about it. We will see you all at 9 tonight, or those of you who are still working. If you have any other questions, the best way to get me is to email reed.magny@wi.gov. Thanks.
Thank you.
This program is a production of Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Eye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civics broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.